My family called me the broke daughter for 10 years. Then, at my sister's engagement dinner, I casually told them I owned the restaurant, and my mother dropped her wine glass. I learned how to be invisible when I was 12. That was the year my older sister, Vanessa, got into a private school. My parents cried, took photos, and told everyone she was gifted. That same year, I won a writing competition. My story was printed in the local paper. I brought it home, folded carefully in my backpack. My dad glanced at it and said, "That's nice, Mia." Then, he went back to talking about Vanessa's new school uniform. That was my childhood. Vanessa was the golden daughter. I was the quiet one, the useful one, the one who cleaned up after parties nobody threw for me. When Vanessa turned 16, my parents bought her a red convertible. When I turned 16, my mom gave me a bus pass and said, "You're more practical anyway." When Vanessa graduated, they rented a hall. When I graduated, they forgot the ceremony time. I stood outside in my cap and gown for 40 minutes, waiting for parents who never came. Later, my mother said, "Oh, honey, you know your sister had that interview today." I smiled and said, "It's okay," but it wasn't okay. By 19, I stopped expecting anything from them. I moved out with 2 bags, $300, and a cracked phone. Vanessa said, "Don't come crawling back when real life gets hard." I didn't answer, because real life had already been hard. I worked mornings at a coffee shop, afternoons at a grocery store, and nights washing dishes at a small Italian restaurant downtown. The restaurant was called Bellero. It was old. The chairs didn't match. The sign outside flickered. But the owner, Mr. Bellero, treated me better than my own father ever had. If I looked tired, he told me to sit. If I skipped dinner, he put pasta in front of me. One night, he found me crying behind the kitchen. I had just seen Vanessa's post. My parents had paid for her new apartment. The caption said, "So proud of our girl starting her dream life." Mr. Bellaro sat beside me and said, "People who ignore you don't decide your worth." That sentence changed my life. I started learning everything about the restaurant: inventory, invoices, reservations, payroll, suppliers, marketing. By 22, I was basically managing the place. By 24, I had helped triple the profit. I built a website, started online bookings, posted food videos, changed the menu, added private events. Bellaro went from half empty to fully booked every weekend. Then Mr. Bellaro got sick. His children wanted to sell the restaurant to a developer. They wanted it turned into luxury apartments. He called me into his office and opened a folder. Inside were papers, a payment plan, private financing, and a price far below market value. He looked at me and said, "You already saved this place once. Now, save it for real." At 25, I bought Bellaro. No one in my family knew. And honestly, they wouldn't have cared. For 3 years, I worked harder than I ever had. I renovated the kitchen, hired better staff, added catering, started private dinners, then corporate events. A food critic came one night and gave us a glowing review. After that, Bellaro became one of the hardest restaurants to book in the city. Meanwhile, my family still thought I was struggling. My mother would call and ask, "Are you still waitressing?" I would say, "Something like that." Then, Vanessa got engaged to a finance guy named Grant. My parents worshipped him. He wore expensive watches and talked like every room belonged to him. The first time he met me, he handed me his empty glass and said, "Can you take this?" At my parents' house. Vanessa laughed and said, "She does work in restaurants." Everyone laughed. I didn't. Then came the engagement dinner. Vanessa wanted somewhere elegant, exclusive, hard to book. So, of course, she chose Bellero, my restaurant. I found out when my events manager said, "Mia, there's a private booking under Vanessa Carter. 22 guests, engagement celebration, private dining room, champagne package." Then I saw the note. "Please make sure staff is professional. Bride's sister works in food service." I sat there for a long time. Then I smiled and said, "Approve it." The dinner was on Saturday night. I wore a simple black dress. When I walked into the private room, my mother frowned. "Mia, you're late." Vanessa looked me up and down and said, "Wow, you actually dressed nicely." Grant smirked. "Did they give you the night off?" I smiled. "Something like that." Dinner started, and as usual, everything was about Vanessa. Her wedding, her dress, her honeymoon, her future house. Then Grant started complaining. The wine was overpriced. The portions were too small. Then he snapped his fingers at one of my servers. My smile disappeared. I said, "Don't do that." The table went quiet. Grant blinked. "What?" I said, "Don't snap at staff." Vanessa rolled her eyes. "Mia, don't embarrass me. You're not working tonight." Grant laughed and said, "She can't help it. Service habits." My mother whispered, "Please don't start." Then Grant leaned back and said, "Relax. It's just a restaurant." That was the moment. Not because he insulted me. I was used to that, but because he insulted the place that raised me. So I stood up. My father sighed. "Mia, sit down." I picked up my glass and said, "Before dessert, I'd like to say something." Vanessa groaned. "This is my engagement dinner." I smiled. "I know." Then I turned to Grant. "You said it's just a restaurant." He shrugged. "It is?" I nodded. "Then you should know whose restaurant it is." The room went still. My mother frowned. "What do you mean?" I looked at her and said, "Bellaro is mine." Silence. Real silence. Vanessa laughed first. "That's not funny." I said, "I'm not joking." Grant pulled out his phone. I watched his face as he searched. Then his confidence disappeared. He whispered, "She's telling the truth." My mother's wineglass slipped from her hand and shattered on the floor. Nobody moved. I said, "I bought Bellaro 3 years ago. I renovated it, expanded it, and turned it into the restaurant you all fought to book." Vanessa's face went red. "You did this on purpose." I laughed once. "You booked my restaurant. You insulted my staff. You let your fiancé treat me like a waitress. And somehow I did this?" She pointed at me and said, "You were supposed to be the simple one." That sentence hit me harder than I expected. Not because it hurt, because it confirmed everything. I looked at her and said, "No, Vanessa, I was the ignored one. There's a difference." Then my mother started crying. "Mia, why didn't you tell us?" I looked at her and said, "Because every time I tried to tell you something important, you made it about Vanessa." My father said, "That's not fair." So I turned to him. "Name one thing about my life." He blinked. "What?" I said, "My best friend, my favorite food, my birthday without checking your phone. Name one thing that proves you paid attention." Nobody spoke. And there it was, the truth. I picked up the bill and placed it in front of Grant. "Dessert is on the house. The disrespect is not." Then I walked out. The next morning, my phone exploded. My mother said I humiliated the family. My father said I should apologize. Vanessa said I stole her moment. Grant sent one message. It said, "Would you be interested in investing in a restaurant group I'm launching?" I blocked him first. Then Vanessa. 6 months later, Bellaro won Restaurant of the Year. There was a photo of me on stage holding the award. For the first time ever, my father posted about me. He wrote, "Proud of my daughter." I stared at it for a long time. Then I deleted the tag. Because I didn't build my life to become visible to people who chose not to see me. I built it because I finally saw myself. And if my family wants a table in my life now, they can make a reservation like everyone else. But here's the part I haven't told anyone yet. Last week, Vanessa called from a number I didn't recognize. She was crying. Grant left her. The wedding is off. And she asked if I could help her get a job at Bellaro. So now I'm wondering, should I give my golden sister a second chance? Or let her learn what it feels like to start at the bottom?